June 14, 1941, Berlin, just after midnight. The room is quiet, but it isn't calm. A single desk lamp cuts through the darkness inside the Reich Chancellery, its light spilling over maps of Eastern Europe spread across a long oak table. Red and blue pencil lines crisscross the Soviet frontier, arrows pointing east, confident, aggressive. Operation Barbarossa is no longer a plan, it is days away. Outside, Berlin sleeps. Inside, a report lies open that should have changed everything. You can almost feel the tension in the air as senior officers stand rigidly, hands clasped behind their backs. Across the table, Adolf Hitler leans forward, eyes fixed not on the paper itself, but on the idea that it represents. A warning, an inconvenient one. The report comes from multiple sources: military intelligence, logistics officers, even frontline commanders who had fought the Red Army before. Different voices, same conclusion. Germany is not ready for a long war in the East. Hitler barely looks up. In the months leading up to Barbarossa, Germany's confidence is absolute. France has fallen in 6 weeks, Poland collapsed in a month, the Balkans were brushed aside with brutal efficiency. Everywhere the Wehrmacht goes, resistance shatters. To Hitler, history itself seems to bend in his favor. The Soviet Union, he believes, will be no different. A rotten structure, he calls it. One kick, he insists, and the whole thing will collapse. But the men who prepare wars for a living, quartermasters, railway planners, fuel officers, see something else when they study the East. Distance. Endless distance. From the Polish border to Moscow alone is over 1,000 kilometers. Roads thin into dirt tracks, railways change gauge, rivers stretch wide and unbridged, and beyond the cities nothing but forests, marshes, and open steppe. Germany's army is fast, but it is not limitless. Warnings begin arriving as early as late 1940. General Georg Thomas, head of the Wehrmacht's Economic and Armaments Office, submits blunt assessments. Germany lacks sufficient fuel reserves. Ammunition stockpiles are calibrated for short campaigns. Winter equipment production has been postponed again. The assumption underpinning everything is clear. The war will be over before winter. Thomas is not convinced. He warns that Soviet industrial capacity, much of it already moving east of the Urals, is being underestimated. He warns that even if the Red Army collapses, replacing it will be easier for the Soviets than sustaining a mechanized war will be for Germany. The reports reach Hitler's desk. They do not change his mind. Others try. Field Marshal Fedor von Bock raises concerns about overstretched supply lines. Heinz Guderian, champion of Blitzkrieg, warns that armored formations cannot outrun their logistics indefinitely. Even Halder's diaries reflect unease about fuel consumption and rail conversion rates. Each warning points to the same danger. Speed will not save Germany if the enemy does not collapse. Hitler listens, then dismisses them. In his worldview, doubt is weakness, caution is sabotage. Anyone who questions the inevitability of victory is accused silently or openly of lacking faith. He believes ideology will do what logistics cannot. The final intelligence estimates before the invasion predict a Soviet collapse within 10 weeks. 10. That number becomes sacred. Everything is built around it: supply planning, ammunition allocation, vehicle maintenance schedules. Winter clothing is not ordered in meaningful quantities because, on paper, it will not be needed. The Wehrmacht crosses the border on June 22, 1941, with confidence in its speed, but not its staying power. And that is the tragedy hidden inside the warning Hitler ignored. Not that Germany would fail quickly, but that it would succeed just enough to go too far. As the invasion begins, reports of victory flood Berlin. Soviet armies encircled, hundreds of thousands captured, entire fronts collapsing. Hitler feels vindicated. Every warning now seems laughable. But beneath the triumph, something dangerous is already happening. Fuel consumption is higher than predicted. Vehicles break down faster than they can be repaired. Rail lines lag weeks behind the advance. Ammunition columns stretch thin across hostile territory. The war is moving faster than Germany's ability to sustain it. And the warning, dismissed, ignored, buried under victory reports, has not gone away. It is waiting. Waiting for distance. Waiting for time. Waiting for winter. The first cracks do not appear at the front. They appear behind it. July 1941, somewhere east of Minsk, early morning. A panzer column sits motionless along a dirt road that stretches to the horizon. Engines idle, then fall silent one by one. Crews climb down from their tanks, lifting engine hatches, checking fuel gauges that already tell them the answer. Empty. You can almost smell the dust and hot metal as officers argue quietly over maps spread across a tank's engine deck. The arrows still point east, the order is still advance. But the fuel is not there. Operation Barbarossa has achieved something extraordinary. In just weeks, the Wehrmacht has smashed through the Soviet border defenses, encircled entire armies, and taken hundreds of thousands of prisoners. On paper, it looks like total success. But success has a weight. Every kilometer forward stretches supply lines thinner. Every destroyed Soviet bridge forces detours. Every captured rail yard brings a new problem: the rails are the wrong gauge. German trains cannot run on them without conversion, sleeper by sleeper, mile by mile. Logistics officers had warned about this. Now they are living it. German planning had assumed speed would solve everything. Blitzkrieg doctrine relied on momentum: hit hard, break the enemy, keep moving. Supplies would catch up once resistance collapsed. But the Soviet Union does not collapse. It bends. And bending buys time. By mid-July, reports from army groups begin to sound different. Not alarmist, not yet, but cautious. Fuel deliveries are delayed. Spare parts are scarce. Truck attrition is far higher than expected. Vehicles not designed for Russian roads break axles, burn out engines, sink into mud. Horses, still the backbone of German logistics, collapse from exhaustion. The irony is brutal. Germany's most modern army is being held together by wagons and animals. General Heinz Guderian feels the strain acutely. His panzer groups have advanced farther, faster than anyone else. They have won their battles, but now they sit at the end of supply lines that barely exist. Guderian pushes anyway. He believes momentum is survival. If he stops, the Red Army will recover. If he waits for supplies, the initiative will die. Berlin encourages him. Hitler demands speed. The warnings from logistics staff are noted and overruled. Ammunition stocks tell the same story. Artillery units begin rationing shells. Tank crews are ordered to conserve rounds. Anti-tank units report shortages just as Soviet counterattacks begin probing the flanks. It is still summer. Still dry. Still warm. And already the system is straining. At headquarters, the numbers no longer align. Soviet losses are staggering, but new formations keep appearing. Factories dismantled in the west are reassembling east of the Urals, beyond German reach. Fresh divisions arrive with minimal training but endless manpower. Germany's victory assumptions had not accounted for replacement on this scale. They had assumed collapse. They are instead facing absorption. By August, the distances become impossible to ignore. A truck carrying fuel from a railhead to the front burns almost as much fuel as it delivers. Maintenance units cannibalize wrecks just to keep a fraction of vehicles running. Recovery crews abandon tanks they cannot tow back. Each abandoned vehicle is a quiet loss. Not dramatic. Not reported in headlines. But permanent. Still, Hitler sees only the map. Cities fall, pockets close, enemy formations disappear. He becomes convinced that logistics concerns are defeatism, that the war will still end before winter, just a little farther east. He begins redirecting forces towards symbolic objectives: Kiev, Leningrad, Moscow. Each decision stretches the system further. Each delay compounds the problem. By the time German forces turn toward Moscow in October, the warning from 1941 is no longer theoretical. It is physical. It is empty fuel drums, worn engines, men sleeping in summer uniforms as nights grow cold. The Wehrmacht has not lost the war yet, but it has lost the margin for error. And winter is no longer an abstraction on a planning map. It is coming. October 1941, the outskirts of Moscow just before dawn. The ground is frozen hard beneath German boots. Frost clings to helmets and rifle barrels, turning breath into pale clouds that hang in the air. Engines cough and stall in the cold. Men stamp their feet, pulling thin coats tighter, already realizing something is terribly wrong. This was never supposed to happen. Not here. Not now. For Hitler, Moscow was more than a city. It was a symbol, the heart of Bolshevism, the final proof that the Soviet Union would collapse if struck hard enough. By autumn 1941, he believed Germany stood on the edge of total victory. What he refused to see was that the real enemy was no longer the Red Army. It was time. As German forces pushed east toward Moscow, the warning ignored months earlier became impossible to escape. Supply lines stretched hundreds of kilometers, rail conversions lagged weeks behind, trucks broke down faster than replacements could arrive, fuel shortages worsened daily. And now the weather turned. The autumn rains, Rasputitsa, transformed roads into rivers of mud, vehicles sank to their axles, horse-drawn wagons stalled completely. Entire columns froze in place not from enemy fire but from terrain. German planners had anticipated bad roads. They had not planned for paralysis. The Red Army used this pause mercilessly. Fresh Soviet divisions, many transferred from Siberia, began appearing on the Moscow front, well-equipped for winter, properly clothed, trained to fight in freezing conditions. Intelligence reports warned of this buildup. Hitler dismissed them. He believed the Soviets had no reserves left. He was wrong. At the front, German soldiers began to understand the truth before Berlin did. Weapons malfunctioned in the cold, lubricants thickened, machine guns jammed, tank engines struggled to start, frostbite cases climbed rapidly, field hospitals overflowed. Winter equipment, coats, gloves, insulated boots had not been issued in sufficient numbers. They had not been prioritized because the war was supposed to be over. This was the cost of ignoring the warning. Soviet resistance hardened. Units that had retreated for months now stood and fought. Counterattacks grew bolder. Small Red Army formations slipped through German lines, striking supply convoys, cutting communications, spreading chaos. The Wehrmacht, built for rapid movement, found itself stuck. Invulnerable. By November, German formations were exhausted. Divisions that had started Barbarossa at full strength were reduced to fractions of their original manpower. Tanks sat immobile for lack of fuel or frozen engines. Artillery pieces were abandoned because horses could no longer pull them. The advance slowed to crawl, then stopped. Hitler's response was denial. He forbade retreat, issued orders demanding ground be held at all costs. He blamed commanders for lacking will. He insisted victory was still within reach if only everyone believed hard enough. But belief does not fuel engines. When the Soviet counteroffensive finally erupted in December 1941, it was devastating. Red Army units struck across the front, exploiting German exhaustion. Fresh troops advanced through snowstorms, supported by skis, sleds, and short supply lines. German defenses cracked under pressure they could no longer absorb. For the first time, the Wehrmacht was driven back in chaos. Not because it had been defeated in battle alone, but because it had been worn down by a war it was never prepared to fight. The warning Hitler ignored had matured into a catastrophe, and the illusion of quick victory was gone forever. December 1941, Wolfschanz, East Prussia, night. Snow presses against the windows of Hitler's headquarters, muffling the world outside. Inside, maps are updated again and again, red pins pushed westward this time, retreats, withdrawals, positions lost. Hitler stares at them in silence. For months, he had refused to acknowledge the warning. Now, faced with its consequences, he refuses something else entirely. Reality. The Soviet winter counteroffensive does not merely push German forces back. It exposes the structural weakness at the heart of the invasion. The Wehrmacht is exhausted. Units are under strength. Equipment is worn out. Horses die by the thousands. fuel shortages become chronic, ammunition stocks are dangerously low, entire formations are held together by improvisation and stubborn discipline. And yet Hitler's orders grow harsher. No retreat. No withdrawal. Stand fast. What had once been a gamble becomes doctrine. German commanders on the front understand the danger immediately. They know that holding exposed positions in winter without mobility or reserves is a death sentence. Generals like von Rundstedt and Guderian request permission to pull back to shorter, defensible lines. Hitler refuses. He believes retreat is weakness, that giving ground invites collapse, that willpower alone can replace fuel, clothing, and logistics. It cannot. As temperatures plunge further, German positions begin to crumble, not from panic but from physics. Weapons freeze, engines crack, steel becomes brittle, men collapse from hypothermia while standing guard. Frostbite claims fingers, toes, entire limbs, hospitals overflow, supplies freeze solid before reaching the front. This is not a failure of courage. It is a failure of preparation. The warning from 1941 had been clear. Germany could not sustain a long war in the East. By refusing to adjust his strategy, Hitler transforms a difficult situation into a disaster. Instead of elastic defense, he demands rigidity. Instead of operational flexibility, he imposes ideological control. Commanders who disobey are dismissed. Those who comply watch their armies bleed. By early 1942, the cost is undeniable. Hundreds of thousands of casualties, entire divisions rendered combat ineffective, equipment losses that German industry cannot replace quickly enough, and perhaps most damaging of all, confidence is gone. The myth of invincibility has shattered. German soldiers no longer believe victory is inevitable. They fight on, but now with the knowledge that survival is not guaranteed and relief may never come. Hitler responds not by reassessing, but by doubling down. He convinces himself that failure came not from ignoring warnings but from insufficient ruthlessness, from commanders lacking faith, from enemies underestimated but not unbeatable. This mindset hardens, and it will shape every major decision Germany makes from this point forward. The Eastern Front does not stabilize. It becomes a war of attrition, one Germany is fundamentally unequipped to win. Manpower favors the Soviets, industry favors the Soviets, geography favors the Soviets. The only thing Germany has left is determination. And determination alone is not enough. The warning Hitler ignored has now transformed into a pattern. Every setback is blamed on others, every reality that contradicts his beliefs is dismissed. Strategic decisions become increasingly detached from conditions on the ground. This is no longer miscalculation. It is denial elevated to policy. And its consequences will not be limited to one winter or one front. They will define the rest of the war. Spring 1942, the Eastern Front. The snow has melted, but nothing has healed. The fields are scarred with wreckage, burned-out tanks half sunk in mud, abandoned artillery pieces, broken wagons rusting where they were left behind months earlier. The German army still stands in the east, but it is no longer the force that crossed the border in 1941. The warning Hitler ignored has done its work. By 1942, the war has changed shape. Germany is no longer fighting for quick victory. It is fighting to survive a conflict it was never prepared to sustain. The consequences of ignoring logistical reality now ripple through every decision, every battle, every retreat. Fuel shortages limit movement, ammunition must be rationed, entire offensives are planned around what can be supplied, not what is strategically ideal. This is the cost of believing ideology could replace preparation. Hitler responds with new gambles. Operation Blue, the drive toward the Caucasus oil fields, is launched not from strength but from desperation. Germany needs fuel, it needs resources, it needs a miracle. Once again, warnings are issued. Once again, they are ignored. The result is Stalingrad. At Stalingrad, everything comes together: overstretched supply lines, underestimated enemy resilience, and the refusal to adapt. The Sixth Army fights itself into ruin, trapped far from support, ordered to hold ground that cannot be supplied. The catastrophe is total, and it traces its lineage directly back to 1941. Back to the moment when a warning lay on Hitler's desk and was dismissed. After Stalingrad, there is no recovery. The Eastern Front becomes a grinding, relentless collapse. German forces fight skillfully, bravely, but always from a position of inferiority. Each year, the Red Army grows stronger. Each year, Germany grows weaker. The imbalance becomes permanent. By the time Soviet troops reach Berlin in 1945, the outcome is no longer in doubt. The war was not lost in one battle. Not in one winter. Not even in one campaign. It was lost when reality was ignored. Hitler believed willpower could bend geography, that ideology could overcome logistics, that faith could replace fuel, clothing, spare parts, and time. The warning he ignored in 1941 was not about defeat. It was about limits. And by refusing to acknowledge them, he ensured that Germany would exceed them fatally. In war, victory belongs not to those who believe the hardest, but to those who prepare for the longest. And on the Eastern Front, the cost of ignoring that truth was the destruction of an empire.